Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. This ain't just business. This is history in motion. A $56 billion nuclear plant deal with India. Oh, that's not just a handshake across the table. That's a thunderclap heard all the way in Paris, in Washington, and Beijing. And let me break it down. When money moves on that level, when energy shifts on that scale, you're not just signing contracts, you're rewriting power. The Thug 6B deal is more than business, and that's what people need to understand before they brush it off as just another trade agreement. On the surface, it looks like numbers, contracts, and construction projects, but underneath, it's a declaration of power. Business deals come and go, but when a nation decides to pour $56 billion into nuclear energy, it's not just chasing profit. It's shaping its future, it's cementing independence, and it's carving out influence that will ripple across generations. Nuclear power isn't the same as buying oil or gas from someone else. This is about sovereignty. It's about saying, we're not going to be held hostage by fluctuating prices, by foreign pipelines, or by political games. This deal positions India as a country that can generate its own energy, fuel its own growth, and dictate its own pace without leaning on anyone else's mercy. That kind of independence is priceless. And the fact that India did it on such a massive scale is what makes this deal bigger than business. It also sends a message to the global stage. Every time a major country signs a landmark deal, it signals where alliances are shifting, where trust is being placed, and where the future balance of power is moving. India choosing to put such enormous faith and money into nuclear energy says it's preparing to be a long-term power player, not just in economics, but in geopolitics. Energy is leverage, and leverage is what decides who gets a seat at the head of the table in world affairs. For France, the shock isn't just losing out on a deal. The shock is realizing that India's moves carry weight big enough to shake markets and strategies. For other nations, the realization is that India has the resources, the vision, and the boldness to bypass the old powers and start setting its own terms. That's when a business deal stops being about contracts and starts being about influence. $56 billion is too big to ignore. It's too bold to dismiss as routine business. It tells the world that India is no longer content with incremental growth. It wants transformative growth. It's a move that changes how the nation is perceived, how it's respected, and how it will be dealt with from this point forward. That's why this deal is more than business. It's a statement of ambition, independence, and undeniable global presence. India is no longer the quiet player, and that is what has the world looking twice right now. For decades, people painted India as the country of tomorrow, always growing, always promising, but never quite sitting in the driver's seat. They saw India as the one who followed the rules others made, the one that adapted but didn't command the room. But the $56 billion nuclear deal has flipped that entire picture upside down. What it shows loud and clear is that India isn't playing the background role anymore. It's standing center stage, and it's not asking for permission. When you make a deal of that magnitude, it's not just about nuclear energy. It's about signaling strength. It's about telling the world, we are ready, and we are not afraid to play at the highest level. And that's exactly the shift the world is witnessing. This is not India waiting for approval from France, the United States, or any of the so-called established powers. This is India writing its own rules and making its own bets on the future. A move of this size shows confidence. It says India is not testing the waters anymore. It has jumped into the deep end and is swimming with the strongest. For too long, India was underestimated because people measured against the old giants, comparing it to Europe, to America, to China. But what they didn't realize was that India was quietly stacking its strengths. Technology, talent, population, power. And now catchery decides to activate all those strengths at once. It doesn't stay quiet for long. This nuclear deal is proof that the time for underestimation is over. India has arrived not as a shadow of someone else, but a force in its own right. This kind of move changes conversations in boardrooms and political chambers worldwide. The narrative shifts from, will India rise? To, how will the world adjust to India's rise? Because there's a difference between potential and presence. Potential is what people used to say about India. Presence is what $6 billion in nuclear energy says about India today. That presence demands respect, it demands recognition, and most importantly, it demands adjustment. India has made it clear that it is not looking to play catch-up anymore. It's not waiting for someone else to lead the way. By making bold, unapologetic moves like this, India is forcing the world to look at it differently. No longer the quiet player in the background, India is now the one making noise loud enough for everyone to hear. France is shocked, and for good reason. They've long seen themselves as one of the undisputed leaders in nuclear technology and energy partnerships. For years, France has been the go-to player when nations around the world wanted to talk nuclear deals, and they wore that crown with pride. But when a $56 billion deal bypasses them and lands in India's court with this kind of weight, it rattles their confidence. It's not just about losing a deal, it's about losing the image of dominance they've enjoyed for decades. That shock comes from realizing the world isn't automatically looking their way anymore. Think about it. France has built its global identity around being a powerhouse in energy, innovation, and diplomacy. They believed those credentials made them untouchable. But India stepping up with a deal this size sends a message the monopoly on influence is over. France, for all its prestige, now has to face the reality that new players are not just competing, they're outpacing. That realization hits harder than losing billions in revenue. It hits pride, it hits perception, it hits their seat at the global table. What stings even more is the speed of the shift. Old powers like France operate with the assumption and their history and reputation will keep them relevant. They count on tradition to secure their place. But India has shown like not respect tradition alone. It respects action, vision, and boldness. By locking in a deal of this magnitude, India has essentially told France, respect is no longer inherited. It's earned, and we just earned it. That leaves France stunned, because they thought they had more time before someone would challenge their dominance so directly. And let's not forget, shock isn't only about money, it's about influence. Every nuclear deal creates alliances, dependencies, and long-term ties. With India securing this agreement, it shifts decades of power dynamics. France expected to remain a central player in shaping global energy strategy, but now they're watching as India begins to shape it instead. That's the kind of shock that makes a nation rethink its strategy, its competitiveness, and even its identity on the world stage. So yes, France is shocked, because this isn't just a contract lost. It's a wake-up call that the world is changing, that the future of power doesn't belong to the same hands it always has, and that India's rise is not a prediction anymore, it's a reality unfolding in front of their eyes. India is now the trendsetter, and that truth is every corner of the global stage. For years, India was seen as the nation catching up, the one learning from the so-called established giants, the one following a path already carved by others. But this $56 billion nuclear plant deal marks a decisive shift. It shows that India is no longer waiting to be shown the way, it's building the way. The boldness of this move sets a precedent, and nations everywhere are paying attention. When you commit at this scale, you don't just participate, you dictate. That's exactly what India is doing. It's showing the world that it's not content with being an observer or a secondary player. It wants to set the standards for how future partnerships are built, how energy independence is pursued, and how global power is defined. That's what trend setting looks like. It's not about following the blueprint someone else left behind. It's about drafting the new one that others will copy. And right now, India's blueprint is loud and be bold, be independent, be unapologetic. This is bigger than energy. When India chooses to lead with a move of this size, it signals to developing nations that they don't have to stay stuck in the shadows of Western powers. It shows them that if you've got the vision, the resources, and the will to act, you can change your story. India is setting a trend that says, we're not the second option. We are the option. That message has weight, because when a nation with 1.4 billion people speaks with action instead of words, the world cannot ignore it. Trendsetters create waves, and India's wave is one of confidence and courage. France's shock, America's watchful eye, China's unease. All of it comes from the realization it's charting its own course and making it attractive for others to follow. That's the power of being a trend setter. You don't just shift your own future. You inspire others to shift theirs. This nuclear deal plants India firmly in a position where it's not only part of the global conversation, it's leading it. Others will now measure their moves against what India just did, and that alone proves the role has changed. India has stopped being the follower and has started writing the playbook. That's what makes this moment historic. It's the birth of India as the trendsetter the world has no choice but to follow. Energy equals power, and that's the truth many people overlook until moments like this force them to pay attention. You can talk about politics, you can talk about military strength, you can even talk about culture, but at the foundation of it all sits energy. Without it, nothing moves, nothing grows, nothing sustains. That's why nations fight over oil, why they compete for pipelines, why they invest billions into renewable resources, and why a $56 billion nuclear deal isn't just about reactors. It's about rewriting power itself. For India, this isn't simply about keeping the lights on or running factories. This is about securing the very engine that drives economic growth, technological advancement, and national security. When you control your energy, you control your destiny. You no longer have to depend on others who can raise prices, cut supplies, or use your dependence as leverage against you. Energy independence is freedom, and freedom is power. That's the deeper meaning of this deal, and that's why the world is watching so closely. Nuclear energy takes that principle to another level. It's clean, it's massive in scale, and it's long-term. Investing in it tells everyone, we're not planning for next year. We're planning for the next 50. That forward-looking vision is what separates powerful nations from struggling ones. The countries that dominate energy dominate global influence, and India is stepping directly into that lane. This isn't just about catching up. It's about locking down a future where India sets the terms of how its power is used and how its influence is respected. Look at history. Every global superpower has mentality to control energy. The industrial revolutions, the oil booms, the renewable energy race, they all show the same pattern. Whoever masters energy masters power. India making this kind of bold leap into nuclear signals that understands the game and is ready to play it on equal footing with the biggest powers out there. So when we say energy equals power, we're not just talking electricity and reactors. We're talking influence, independence, and leverage on the world stage. India has just made it clear that it refuses to let anyone else hold the keys to its future. That is why this deal is more than numbers. It's a transfer of power from dependency to dominance, from waiting to leading. Energy equals power, and India just claimed a whole lot more of both.